Hello and welcome back to Dish and Tell, the place where stories linger long after the last bite. Today's episode has a slightly different vibe. There's no guest next to me, well, except for my cat, Pistachio. No clinking forks. It's just me and a root beer float. Because today, rather than invite someone to physically join me at my table, I'm asking my dad to join me in spirit. That's why I'm wearing this shirt of his right now. The root beer float was one of his go-to desserts. Frosted mugs were always at the ready in the freezer, alongside a gallon of Breyer's vanilla ice cream with its little vanilla bean flecks, and Barq's root beer, chosen for that infamous bite. My dad would scoop the ice cream in that frosted mug first and then top it off with root beer, gradually finishing the can and kind of taking little sips with your straw so you don't foam over. That was always the true test of skill. And it just felt only right that one of us should be enjoying it now. I'd love for my dad to be here next to me, but he passed away 13 years ago. And his passing was the first of several deeply painful deaths that brought me face to face with grief in its absolute fullest expression. It was the greatest heartbreak I've ever known, and yet I wouldn't go back in time and change it if I could. Because what I've learned with grief as my guide is that the deepest wounds often bear the greatest gifts if you're willing to let that possibility exist. The late poet Andrea Gibson put it in a way I never could. Just to be clear, I don't want to get out without a broken heart. I intend to leave this life so shattered, there's going to have to be 1,000 separate heavens for all my flying parts. And if you haven't seen their film, Come Find Me in the Good Light yet, oh my goodness, it is an incredible exploration of mortality, humanity, and love. So please add it to your queue. But back to my dad, because this is a really timely moment for us. This episode will come out slightly after what would have been his 71st birthday and right before Father's Day. And as a result, I feel called to share more about what I've learned by embracing grief and letting it be a guide allowed to sit alongside me rather than something I try to deny. I guess it turns out my dad is still teaching me and protecting me, hyping me up to sit here in my vulnerability and share this with you. He's still very much in communication with me. And yeah, our language looks a lot different now, but 13 years in and I think we're pretty fluent. And that's largely because of my openness to signs. Magical little synchronicities that have come to be an incredible source of comfort for me. Especially in those first few years of his passing when I was missing him deeply and just really needed his support. I'd ask for a sign that he was still with me, and without fail, a hummingbird would flutter by. I'll never forget when I was living in LA, contemplating a move to Montana, and how every time I started to question it, doubt myself, doubt my path, I'd ask my dad for guidance, and a hummingbird would arrive as if on cue. It didn't matter the time of day, the time of year, that hummingbird was always there to help me realize that where I was headed was exactly right. There are many other ways I communicate with him and others I've loved who have died. And I believe the vocabulary is different for every dynamic. And if this is something that sparks your curiosity and resonates with you, a wonderful resource is the book Signs by Laura Lynn Jackson. And I'd love to know what animals, numbers, little synchronicities show up in your life and help you feel connected and in communication with the people you love. Okay, I'm going to let you in on something I'm a little shy and nervous about saying out loud. I've really only let my inner circle in on this thought. But I actually feel closer to my dad in his death than I did in his life, because now I feel him with me always. I spend a lot of my free time hiking and chasing beautiful remote views in high places. Basically being places I know he would love, but that if he were living, he'd only ever be able to experience through a texted photo. And now I can sit at the summit and know that he's right there beside me, just like Pistachio right now. Just the other week, I hiked to Livingston Peak at sunset for his birthday. And for anyone not familiar, Livingston's wind is a thing. But the moment we hit the saddle, we were graced with calm, clear weather. And I just couldn't help but smile, feeling him so acutely in that moment and know that he had painted that all just for me. Science tells us that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed. So I choose to believe that my dad has transformed into a force that will never leave my side. And with him by my side right now, I don't know, maybe being a co-host with me for this, and as a card-carrying member of the I've Lost Someone Club, I'm going to do my best to speak from my heart and in a way that I hope can be a balm for you. And I use that word club intentionally because it really does feel like a club. The club no one actually wants to be a part of, but eventually finds their way to. And, it's interesting to me how there seems to be a shorthand between people who have experienced death, this tender knowing of what you've both been asked to endure. It's like we're implanted with these little magnets that know when a heart has been carved in a similar way. Without leading with it or even uncovering this truth until our friendship goes deeper, some of my closest and most beautiful friendships are with people who have experienced profound loss as well. And I just really think that that's why. And because 5 was my dad's favorite number, another sign, here are 5 things that grief and my dad have taught me. The first lesson is don't hand your power over to the calendar. Father's Day, Mother's Day, birthdays, anniversaries. There are a parade of other holidays that all could understandably feel heavy, especially when the barrage of marketing emails celebrating these moments start hitting your inbox, reminding you of what you don't have rather than what you do. And, that heaviness is human. I used to dread this time between my dad's birthday and Father's Day so much that I would proactively warn my friends and my coworkers and just remind them the significance of these dates that I just gave an unfair share of attention to. And I would preemptively apologize for coming off short or being low energy or just being in any way that wasn't my most sparkly self. And, here's what I've learned. When you're standing in heavy boots, you still have a choice. You can linger in sadness and give your power to dates on a calendar, or you can choose happiness. And to be clear, I am not suggesting you should deny your sadness or pretend that pain doesn't exist. It's about actively deciding to focus on the time you did have together, of the laughs you did share, of the quirky things they loved, of all that you did physically have at one time. In her book, Marrow, Elizabeth Lesser writes, "Don't strain against pain. Learn its purpose, work with it, and the energy of the universe will assist you." And as someone who tried to strain against pain, I can attest, I can confirm, working with it is ironically a far less painful path. Which leads me to lesson number 2. Pull up a chair for them. I'm talking about the person still here who has lost someone, and for that person who has passed. I noticed that on Father's Day, people would avoid me, which actually hurt even more. They'd avoid mentioning their own plans, their gifts, their dads, especially in that immediate period after loss. And listen, I get it. It's easy to stumble, to be unsure, to be self-conscious about the vibe, but in suppressing the share, you're erasing the experience. The way I celebrate Father's Day now looks different, but it doesn't mean that I don't have a dad I love and memories I'm yearning to tell. So here's my suggestion. Invite your friends who have experienced loss to share. Ask them for a favorite memory, their person's favorite meal. Maybe they'll clue you in on the nickname that only that person was allowed to use, as long as you swear you'll never use it on them in return. Whatever you do, please don't leave them out and assume that they don't want to share or that it's just too painful. That might very well be the case, but let them tell you that. I'd be willing to bet that if given the opportunity, they'd lean in. People get self-conscious about their grief. I know I did. And they feel like they've used up their allotted time to talk about it. The greatest gift you can provide is to let them know that you're still willing to listen. And that's willing to listen to the good and the bad, which leads me to lesson number 3, no pedestals. As we choose happiness, it's important to not put those who have passed on a pedestal. You know, we're told never to speak ill of the dead, but what if we gave ourselves permission to simply speak honestly, not from a revisionist perspective, but from a human one? No person is perfect or without fault. My dad very much included. While incredibly loving and having impeccable taste in dessert, he was also really quick to jump to anger, and that made our relationship challenging at times. I think the best way to remember someone you've lost is to not overly romanticize your time together, but to look at it candidly, to love the whole person, not the highlight reel, because the whole person is who you actually miss. So, grief. It is a shapeshifter, and that is lesson number 4. Grief is complex because it is never static. It is always in motion. A mentor of mine described it as undulating waves of hope and despair. And I'm recognizing that the waves don't ever disappear. Just the frequency and intensity with which they crash changes, and often without notice. Immediately after my dad died, there were basic logistics that needed to be tackled. And in a strange way, they kept him close and had the waves kind of out at sea, just gaining strength. I mean, some of those tasks, like flying all the way across the country to get home, writing the obituary, helping to coordinate the arrangements with the funeral home, going through his closet with my mom and my sister. And, you know, with all of these outstanding items, there was still this kernel of hope that he was just on vacation or traveling somewhere and he'd eventually return. When really, these tasks just kept me distracted. They helped me move forward when I felt numb. And also, in a sense, I felt like despite not being in front of me, he still wasn't gone. He hadn't fully moved out of the physical realm yet. It was once I got past these tasks that the wave crashed and that despair settled in. I had no other distractions, nothing left to do but sit with my sadness. And this is when the future moments I assumed we'd share just started pummeling me one after another. I thought we'd fish together in Montana. I thought he'd walk me down the aisle. I thought he'd call to say how proud he was of me after a promotion or a big project at work. 13 years later, it's still hard to start a new project. It's still hard to start Dish and Tell, something I'm so proud of, without being able to have that direct conversation, hear his voice and fill him in. On that note, I'm often asked how to show up for someone who is grieving. And my advice is always, please check in on them when the dust settles. When they're 2 weeks, a month out, 3 months out from the funeral or moment of goodbye. Because that's when the casseroles stop coming and the real loneliness moves in. Going back to Elizabeth Lesser's words, it's important not to resist, but to surrender to time. Lesson number 5. Time is a fascinating paradox because it is both a healer and a thief. In mourning, it can claim a significant amount of your present moments and also your future. And it can also soften the hard edges of your loss, of your new normal. It can help laughter return more easily and tears flow less freely. Your job is simply to surf the waves without guilt, without judgment, with only love. To give yourself grace that if you end up in a puddle of tears a decade after the fact, or within the first months of saying goodbye, you're tucking yourself into bed at night and you suddenly realize that the entire day went by and you hadn't shed a tear, I promise it doesn't mean you're forgetting them or loving them less or not moving forward. It just means you're metabolizing this new version of your relationship and you're learning how to surf those waves. Because loss is unavoidable. It will touch all of us at some point. And I was thinking, alongside love, grief is the one thing we all share. Maybe that's why they say grief is just love with no place to go. Maybe you can't physically hand it to your person anymore, but you can still let it flow their way. A hike to a summit, a story told out loud, a root beer float on a random Tuesday. While we can't run from loss, we can choose how we accept it and let it be a teacher rather than an enemy. Truthfully, loss has expanded my color palette of emotion. Where I used to see the world in a handful of primary colors, heartbreak cracked the box wide open, and now I have this enormous spectrum available to me. I feel sadness more deeply, yes, but I also feel joy more vividly, gratitude more sharply, love more completely, and I wouldn't trade the full palette for anything. That is the wound's gift. So what do I hope lingers after this conversation like a really good dessert? Well, I'm going to bookend this little episode with one more thought from the brilliant Andrea Gibson. When nothing softens the grief, may grief soften me. May the wound be your greatest gift, my friends. So I'm going to raise this root beer float, a little melty now, exactly how he liked it, to my dad. Happy 71st birthday, Pops, and happy Father's Day. And if you're missing someone this week, here's my invitation. Make their thing, their float, their grilled cheese, their 2 sweet pie. Set it on the table and let them join you in spirit. I promise the seat won't feel as empty as you fear. And to anyone who has lost someone, a parent, a pet, a sibling, a child, a friend, a partner, any beating heart that has meant something to you, you are not alone. I see you, I feel you, and I love you. To anyone who hasn't yet, grief will find you. And when it does, let me be the one to welcome you to the club. I saved you a seat, and I promise there will be dessert. So until next time, buon appetito. Oof, goodness. Thank you to everyone who pulled up a chair and joined me for this special solo episode of Dish and Tell. I'm not going to lie, this was a scary one for me to record because it is so vulnerable and it just took me to the absolute edges of my comfort zone. But I am discovering that when I'm courageous enough to stop worrying about how I'm received or what other people think and just share the truth on my heart, I am met with kindness, warmth, and human connection in spades. Others stopping me to share their stories and sending me messages, and I'm just reminded of why I set out to create Dish and Tell in the first place. So if you liked this episode, or frankly anything else that I'm serving up at Dish and Tell, the easiest way to show your support is to like and follow this podcast. You can also find a written exploration of grief over on my Substack, which is linked in the show notes. It's a free post available to subscribers and non-subscribers alike. So please read it, share it, use it, bookmark it. It is yours, and I hope that it is helpful. And I just hope to see you again soon. Ciao, friends.